What hurts more, being stabbed in the chest by an enemy, or being hunted by the person you once revered as a father targeted by a spear thrown at a family dinner table? Have you ever found yourself in a position where yesterday you were a hero, cheered by the world, but today you are a pariah rejected by society? When the glory fades, when your loved ones turn their backs, and when God seems silent in the face of your injustice, do you still have the courage to remain righteous? This isn't a sugar-coated religious story. This is the journey of a man pushed to the brink, teen forced to choose between becoming a saint or a killer just to survive. Welcome to Catholic Saint Stories on Saintly Journey. We usually remember David for his legendary victory over Goliath. But few notice the moment he was forced to act like a madman just to save his life. Imagine this, a great warrior, the one anointed to be king, now clawing at city gates like a lunatic, letting spittle run down his beard just so people wouldn't kill him. God didn't save David with a miracle from the heavens. He allowed him to pass through the depths of utter humiliation. Sometimes, God doesn't lift you out of the mud immediately. He lets you stay there long enough to realize honor is not found in the crown on your head, but in the integrity of your heart, even when you are kneeling in the dirt. David's life is a breathtaking action film that begins with a betrayal. King Saul, his father-in-law, and sovereign let toxic jealousy turn into a demon. The harp music that once soothed Saul's soul was now met with cold spears aimed directly at David's heart. He fled. He ran from the luxury of the palace to the city of Nob, a place of priests and prayers. Here, a bitter internal conflict began. He had to lie to survive. And he had to take up the sword of Goliath, the very weapon that once brought glory, now heavy with the burden of a man who no longer had a home. The climax of this tragedy took place at the cave of Adullam. David was not alone in a conventional way. Surrounding him were 400 people, debtors, the downtrodden, and souls bitter with the regime. They looked at David and asked, "Shall we take our revenge?" The sword in David's hand at that moment trembled not just from fear, but from the weight of 400 grievances waiting to be unleashed. The wicked don't hate you because you are bad. They hate you because your light exposes the darkness in their own hearts. The desert and the caves were God's refining fire. A king who has not tasted the misery of the common man will forever remain a tyrant on the throne. When you are falsely accused or oppressed, your first instinct is an eye for an eye. But David's story teaches us, do not let the actions of others dictate your moral value. Never build your future on a foundation of resentment, for that house will collapse the moment your enemy disappears. In our modern world, David's desert is the moments you are isolated, bad-mouthed by colleagues, or denied recognition by your family. We easily fall into acting mad, hiding our true selves to survive. Or worse, accumulating bitterness while waiting for the day to explode. Many people today are living in caves of resentment, spending their lives stalking enemies through phone screens, hurting themselves with the success of others. Escape the cave of your mind before you escape your physical circumstances. True freedom begins when your enemy no longer haunts your thoughts. David is standing in the darkness of the cave. The breath of his enemy is only a few steps away. Will one stroke of the sword end all the pain? Or will an act of mercy open a new destiny? What would you do if your mortal enemy suddenly appeared, completely defenseless, right before your eyes? No witnesses, no guards, just you, your enemy, and a razor-sharp sword in your hand. It is the moment where all the justice in the world seems to align in your favor to settle the score once and for all. But is this a gift from God? Or is it the most brutal test your soul will ever face? Join Saintly Journey as we step into the darkness of the cave of En Gedi to witness this defining moment. Here, on a phenomenal level, David was hiding in the cave when his number one enemy walked in without his guards. He found himself fighting the most intense peer pressure imaginable. His 400 soldiers, men who had suffered with him, were all whispering in his ear, "This is the day the Lord delivered your enemy into your hands. End it now." Sometimes, doing the right thing is hardest not because of the enemy in front of you, but because the people on your side are egging you on to do the wrong thing. In the sweltering desert heat, Saul steps into a cave to rest, completely unaware that David is holding his breath in the deepest shadows. The cause of David standing up and moving like a ghost is not simple curiosity. He gets close enough to touch the man who stole his peace. One thrust to the throat, and the flight would be over. Instead, hook nails, and rather than cutting his enemy's throat, he gently cuts a corner of Saul's robe. A small act, yet one that carried the weight of an entire kingdom. Why? Because on the level of essence, David did not look at Saul as just a terrible individual. He looked at the position God had placed Saul in. He respected God's order more than his own desire for vengeance. True power does not lie in the ability to end a life, but in the ability to control your own sword at the very moment your instincts are screaming the loudest. In life, we often find opportunities to take down others when they slip up a boss's mistake. A colleague's secret. We call it karma. But in reality, that is when God is watching to see if you are fit to lead. Never lower your moral standards just because your enemy has lost theirs. If you had the chance to get even today with the person who made you cry, would you choose the sword for a moment of satisfaction? Or would you choose eternal peace for your soul? Don't look away. Get ready to see how David will use this piece of cloth to defeat Saul shortly. There is a kind of power that does not come from swords, but from the raw, naked truth. When David stepped out of the dark cave of En Gedi, he did not carry the severed head of his enemy. He carried a piece of cloth, a silent yet thunderous testament of mercy. Join Saintly Journey as we explore the moment when pride knelt before righteousness. On the level of phenomenon, Saul had just walked out of the cave when a voice rang out from behind. "My lord the king." David held up the cut corner of the robe, proving he could have killed the king, but chose not to strike the Lord's anointed. This action led to a deep cause, Saul's awakening. Saul's tears were not those of a sovereign, but of a father realizing he had almost murdered his most faithful son. He recognized that David was truly fit for the crown because he knew how to rule himself before ruling a nation. Goodness is the only weapon capable of piercing the armor of a hateful heart. You cannot extinguish fire with fire. You can only drown it with the cool waters of mercy. In terms of essence, David surrendered the judgment to God. May the Lord judge between you and me. When you stop trying to execute justice through your own lowly instincts, you allow the absolute justice of God to prevail. He courageously pointed out the fault from a higher moral ground, showing his enemy that their hatred was ultimately meaningless. This story leads us to practical application. In a world full of division, let your cut robe speak. Don't just hoard evidence for revenge. Use your integrity as evidence that the other person was wrong. This is how you win a war without creating more enemies. Instead of using your pain as a weapon to attack, use it as a bridge to empathize with those who are suffering just like you. As this journey concludes, forgiveness does not change the past, but it surely widens the future. Are you holding a scrap of cloth or a sword? Do you want your enemy to fall? Or do you want the resentment in your heart to die? Don't leave. Do you know what David did while sitting on the throne to keep his vow? Prepare for an ending that will melt even the hardest hearts. The story does not end at the cave. Decades later, while sitting upon the throne of power, David did not seek to exterminate the descendants of his enemy according to the harsh rules of ancient dynasties. Instead, he looked into his heart to fulfill a promise. He searched for Mephibosheth, the disabled son of Jonathan, the grandson of Saul, who was living in fear. David did not grant him a death sentence, but rather an embrace and a permanent place at the king's table, equal to the royal princes. The forgiveness seated in the dark cave long ago had now blossomed into a feast of complete reconciliation. True power lies not in how many enemies you can eliminate, but in how many promises you keep when no one forces you to do so. Complete forgiveness is when you are willing to set a place for the one who hurt you right at the dining table of your life. As this journey concludes, David leaves an invaluable legacy. Revenge brings only fleeting satisfaction, but forgiveness brings eternal peace. Today, who is the Mephibosheth in your life today? Let love guide you and prepare a seat for them. We'd love to hear your story about forgiveness taking root in your heart. Please share it in the comments. Thank you for traveling with Saintly Journey.